Oh, nice.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to Drum Your Edge. Chris Warunki's here with us again.
Hey, guys, I'm back. I'm taking over.
He's taking over. That's not a bad thing, actually.
Thank you.
Yesterday we did adding splashes to your beats, and now this is the follow-up.
This is adding splashes
to your fills.
Yeah. So some of you were here yesterday. Some of you probably weren't here yesterday.
Yep.
So we're just going to start by going over the splash cymbals that are on this kit, because I've got 4 of them in 4 different sizes. I don't usually use 4 splash cymbals on my kit, although it is a lot of fun when you have 4 splash cymbals to choose from.
And it's a splash lesson, so
why
not give you all the options?
Yeah, I thought that I would put one up of each size.
So quickly, Jay, just go over them quickly because we already kind of went over them yesterday. But
just in case somebody missed it yesterday. So we got the 6-inch Zildjian A right here, which has a nice high pitch. Kind of chimey sounding, almost bell sounding. Then we've got the 8-inch Paiste Formula 602. Also a bit chimey, but lower pitched. And then we've got the 10-inch Formula 602 by Paiste as well. I really like this one. It's got a nice attack to it. It's not too bright, it's not too dark, it's somewhere right in between. And then we've got my 12-inch Sabian Ozone AAX splash over here on the right. It's quick, dark, and trashy. So we've pretty much got 4 very particular pitches happening there. And we're going to utilize as many of these splash cymbals as we can in our drum fills today.
Yeah, and before we get going, too, a lot of people asked yesterday, what if I don't have a splash cymbal? Can I use my crash? Can I use this and that? And what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, that was a great question. And I said basically just substitute the bell of a cymbal for a splash. You can use the bell of a crash cymbal as a little accent. You can use the bell of a ride. You can use them both.
Yeah, the idea is just because the splash cymbals are quick. They've got quick attack. They're almost like a little bit rhythmic. They have like more of like a melody to them because they're a higher pitch and stuff. So you can get the same ideas out of the bells, but I mean, just go get yourself a splash cymbal because there's so many uses for them. So
they're very practical. I mean, they're easy to mount on your kit. They're pretty affordable nowadays, and there's a lot to choose from. So usually when I'm playing a gig, I have at least 1 splash cymbal, if not 2 at a time. So a lot of these fills are going to incorporate mainly 2 splash cymbals, the 6 and the 10. We're going to branch out to the 8 and the 12 as well, of course. But if you don't have 2 splash cymbals on your kit, just substitute 1 for the bell of a crash. And that'll probably give you a pretty good idea of how to incorporate these into your fills. Okay, so starting out, what we're going to do is I'm just going to show you guys a couple of my go-to splash fills that are very practical, pretty much for any style of drumming. I'm just going to play a basic groove, and I'm going to use the 6 and the 10-inch, and they're going to be on, let's put them on the E, or let's put them on the and the 1. So this is a pretty common splash fill. It's very useful. Check it out. I just love doing that.
Yeah.
It just works every time.
Yeah, it
you know what I mean?
Completes the phrase.
Completes the phrase, yeah. And I think Vinny Colaiuta is the first guy that I heard use this fill.
Okay.
And use it really effectively. It's pretty much all over the 10 Summoner's Tale album by Sting. So if you guys haven't heard that one, definitely take a listen to it. There's some really nice splash work happening throughout that entire album. And he's just a master of, musical drumming, really. And that's what splashes are going to do for you. They're going to make your drumming more musical. So let's take a look at maybe moving those 2 splashes somewhere else in the bar. Let's put them on the E and the and instead of the and then the downbeat. It sound like this. So it gave it a bit of a different feel there.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought I'd incorporate that 12-inch as well.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah.
One thing that's kind of going in the chat a little bit too is about, and we didn't talk about this yesterday, is about electric kit players. You know?
Okay, yeah, guys that just have the electronic kits.
Yeah, just have the electronic kits. One person saying, "I don't have any on my pads to program on my electric kit."
Because I play an electric kit too, and I guess just on the particular one that I have, the Roland, the TD11, I believe it is.
Yep.
You can substitute a crash for a splash cymbal if you go into the settings.
Yeah.
But I guess maybe some of them don't have splashes programmed into them.
I think most Roland and Yamahas. I don't know about the box too. I'm sure you can with that as well. But just program a splash in. You know, I mean, the kit upstairs too. Some of them I'll be flipping through the kits and there's a splash on the crash and it throws you off. But it's just great. You know, you can easily do it. So
you can also just program a percussion instrument like a tambourine would work.
Yep.
That's probably the next best thing, really. Just try to put a tambourine on one of your cymbal pads. Use it as if it were a splash cymbal. We're going to get into some double-handed fills as well coming up here. And those sound really nice even on a tambourine.
Yeah.
So that'll be a good substitute for if you don't have a splash cymbal sound. Maybe you have a tambourine or a shaker or something like that. Just anything that's very quick and percussive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And for anybody who wasn't here yet, yesterday's lesson too, one more thing I just want to quickly say is this is not a lesson where Chris is going to give you just a ton of different fills to use your splashes with, like here's 10 fills to use your splash. It's a conceptual lesson. There are some notes very quickly, so if you do want to check out the PDF, we're just talking about tom, splash fills, combo fills, linear fills with a splash, polyphonic pairings, which is going to be really cool. You're going to learn about that, and melodic fills. So
yeah, exactly. So we got a lot of stuff to cover here.
Take it away, man.
All right. So, so this is just basically how I'm incorporating splash cymbals as little fills when I'm grooving. They're not really part of the groove. They're just little fills. So we're going to keep going with this concept, and I'm going to put, as I mentioned before, sort of a double-handed approach here, where we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 E and. So now we're going to put it on the 6-inch splash, right, left, right, ending up on the 10-inch splash. It sounds like this. So that's a really sort of quick and easy way to incorporate splashes as fills. Just basic fills. Think about 16th notes and where you can put those splash cymbals in the 16ths.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example from a song called Tell Me by Omnisite, which is my band, where I'm using splash cymbals in the verse, and I'm kind of changing it up a bit. So here's the splash fills from Tell Me. So I'm using a set of 3 splashes in that one, the 6, the 8, and the 10, and I'm switching up the order just to get sort of a different melodic phrasing. So it's not the same when I play it again the second time. It's a different voicing.
Yeah.
And that's something that's really fun to do with these splash cymbals. You know, change it up, mix it up, and just get to know them, get to know the different pitches, because sometimes you want to go high to low, sometimes you want to go low to high. When you have 3 of them, there's that note that's sort of in between. So yeah, it's good to experiment with what you want out of your splash cymbals in terms of sort of melodic ideas, which we kind of covered yesterday a little bit as well. Yeah. All right. There's also an example from the song Kept Away, which is a ballad. It gets pretty quiet in the verses, but coming out of it into the pre-chorus, I do a little bit of a splash fill between the hi-hats. It sounds like this. So that's another way that I'm using splashes, as little fills. They're just accents, just coloring what's happening there, just making it sound a little bit more colorful. I could have used toms, but I really like the tones of the splash cymbals.
So rather than just learning like that specific fill, like what do you think of when you're playing that? Is it just instead of playing the toms, I'm going to play my splash? And I mean, you have 4 splashes here, which is like a luxury, I think, for a lot of drummers. So if you only have one, when you don't have the opportunity to make a melodic thing happen, like how would you kind of approach that?
Yeah, so if you only have one splash cymbal, you can think about accenting around the beat, I guess you could say, if you want to do a fill. For example, like if I'm just going to use one splash cymbal as a fill, and I do that sometimes, then I can think about, okay, am I hearing sort of an offbeat accent, or is it on the beat? And if it's off the beat, you can do something like this. So those were just a couple examples of how you can incorporate one splash cymbal as little fills, and think about sort of a 16th note grid and where you can put that splash cymbal around what you're playing. And and just try to get creative with it. Yeah, because you don't need 4 splash cymbals.
Yeah.
It is a luxury to have 4 splash cymbals set up on a drum kit, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So moving on, wanted to give you an example of, again, how I'm using these as little fills, sort of coming out of a drum groove. It's not really part of the groove, but it's sort of adding a bit of color to it. And this is from Omnisight's song called Sheltered Mind, which is a really interesting groove in 7. And I'm using the splash cymbals just to sort of accent what's going on with this very rhythmic groove. The guitars follow the kick pattern, so I'm sure you can imagine that. It sounds like this. So as you can hear, those splash accents are moving around. I'm using different splash cymbals, and I'm using it just to sort of decorate that groove. They're little fills here and there, but always going back to that groove.
Give us another example similar to that, but with a different groove, if you can.
Sure, yeah. So just adding splashes for color. I consider these little fills because they're different every time.
Yeah.
So although your groove is going to stay pretty much the same, your splash fills are going to be a little bit different around that.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's just a way to try to get creative with your splash fills.
Cool.
Put them on different 16ths, basically, which I like to do a lot. Comes up in my playing a lot. If you listen to Omnisight, you'll hear splashes in almost every song.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're on the beat, sometimes they're off the beat, sometimes I'm doing crazy things with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So what do we have next on the list there, Dave?
Toms splash.
Okay, Tom. So most drummers think of toms when they think of fills, right? Most commonly, we're going to go to the toms for our drum fills because it does something different than the groove, which is usually kick and snare based. So we usually think, okay, I'm playing the groove, I've been on the kick and snare for a while, I better play some toms, right? Just to get a different sound and to get a different vibe happening. Now, the thing I like to do a lot is incorporate my splash cymbals with my tom fills. You'll also hear this in the music of Omnisite. I'm going to give you a couple of specific examples, and then we'll go from there. So one fill I like to do, and it's pretty simple, is just move your right hand to the splash cymbal when you're doing like a basic 16th note fill. And I came up with sort of a rhythm, a very rhythmic fill that incorporates the toms and the splashes, and it sounds like this. So that's a way to incorporate your splashes with toms.
So how do you come, like that's just, obviously it's a specific fill that you came up with.
Yeah.
How would you approach that if you wanted to just, I'm trying to think of a way to word this here. How would you start adding in your splashes in a more creative way rather than just have like one fill?
A good way to start is just come up with a basic 16th note fill that you're comfortable with playing. So it could be something like, could be a phrase like that, something as simple as that. Now, instead of hitting that tom, why don't you try to hit a splash cymbal? So that would sound like this. So within a groove, just to give you some context, it really changes it up. It would sound like this. I'm going to play the basic 16th note fill, and then I'm going to do some splashes with it.
Cool, yeah.
Okay. So what I was doing there is I was just moving 16th notes around kind of randomly and incorporating some splash cymbals instead of tom hits. So I'm just substituting splashes for toms. Yeah. It's as easy as that.
Can you do that again? Just do it for a little bit longer, maybe change the tempo up a little bit.
Sure.
And maybe you don't get out of 16th notes all the time, maybe do some triplet or something like that.
Okay.
So this is just the concept of replacing one of your toms with a splash.
Sure, yeah. Okay. So we're going to branch out a little bit here. And yeah, I'll change it up a little bit. I'll do a half time, sort of double time thing.
Sure.
Let's try that.
Nice. So that's what I love to hear. I just love to hear where you're going in your mind and some of the stuff you're coming up with on the spot, but you know what these sound like, you know what they do. And a couple of the times you were playing your bass drum with them too. And I wanted to bring that up because in the first couple times you didn't even add no bass drum to the splash and they sounded great.
Right, open splashes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they sound nice. And that's kind of alluding to what we're getting into here with some of the combo fills and polyphonic stuff that's on the list as well. So there's a lot you can do, but let's just remember that if you start with basic 16ths, you can put those anywhere. They don't always have to be on toms. You can move them to crash cymbals or anything really, hi-hats, rides. I like to experiment just to get some different sounds happening and more interesting fills. So what you can do if you're just starting out with splashes is just simply take your favorite 16th note fills, try to move your hand to a splash or two, and just see what that sounds like because you're going to come up with a whole new thing, you know. And I'll also try to work them in as sort of breaking up the fill as well. That's usually pretty useful. You can do stuff like. So in that example, I had sort of this phrasing in mind, like. So I had that going on. I was just filling in between. So I'm really just using the splash cymbals to accent that phrase, and then everything else in between is just filled in with the toms. Yeah. Cool. So let me just check my notes here. So that fill that I was talking about happens in harmony shallow, the one that goes between the splashes and the toms. I also do a similar one in no atrophy. But I mean, you can get really creative with it, right? You can move it around the kit. It doesn't have to always be right here. If you have a couple splash cymbals, maybe you want to try to put one on your right side just to see what that sounds like and what kind of results you get with that. You could do stuff like. So what I did is I just took that concept, I took that fill that I was playing, and I just transposed it. I moved it from the rack toms to the floor toms, the rack toms and the 10-inch to the floor toms and the 12-inch over here. So that's something that you could try to do as well, just to, just so you're not always playing the same exact sounding fill. It is the same fill, but you're making it sound different.
Orchestrating it differently.
Orchestrating it differently, thank you.
What about, sorry, did you have some...
No, just some other ideas for tom fills and things like that. Go ahead then.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Hold that thought though. I want to hear that. I want to hear that right after. Yeah, so that's one of the fills that I like to play, and it's kind of like it's interesting because the kick is happening along with that fill, so it's almost kind of like borderline groove. It's basically a fill that grooves because you have that pulse underneath, which is the. So that could go either way. If you keep looping that, it's going to turn into a groove. In the context that I'm using it, I use it as a fill because it's coming out of a different groove, and I'm using that as a transition to get from one groove to the next, basically. So so let's see. Go ahead. That thought that you had there, Dave.
All I wanted to say was based around, we're talking about if you don't have a splash. One thing I forgot to mention, and maybe we did yesterday, but opening your hi-hats by playing it really nice and crisp and like a little bark is another really quick rhythmic high or high frequency little punch.
That's true. You could do that. You could utilize an open hi-hat as a pseudo splash cymbal. Like for example, when we're doing the 16ths from the left hand to the right hand, it's pretty easy to just, instead of do this, okay, to do this. I find that it works really well with 10-inch splash.
Yeah.
Because it has that nice, dark, trashy sound, kind of like a open hi-hat. And I'm not opening them up really wide. I'm just opening them a tiny bit just to get that sort of hiss out of them. So yeah, try that. If you only have one splash cymbal and you want to try some of these double splash concepts, a little bit of open hi-hat will do the trick.
So what about combo fills?
Okay, combo fills, yeah. Combo fills are awesome. They're some of my favorite types of fills, and I have like at least a couple lessons in the archives of combo fills, so you can check those out if you haven't seen them yet. Combos are pretty much the same concept as just moving basic 16ths around the kit, and all you're doing is substituting drums for cymbals, in this case the splash cymbals, and you get really cool results. I remember hearing Mike Portnoy do some of these combo fills. He was doing them on splashes and stacks, and they just sounded so awesome because you're expecting to hear drums. You're expecting to hear like toms or snare drum in a combo fill, and all of a sudden when you get cymbals, it's like, wow, that was pretty unique. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to take the basic combo of 2 and 2. So you're going to do 2 with the feet and 2 with the hands. or 2 with the hands and then 2 with the feet, however you want to orchestrate it. And then we're going to move them from drums to cymbals just so you can get an idea of the different tonalities that are happening when we start to incorporate splash cymbals into these combo fills.
Nice, that's Portnoy to the T there, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, so you're just experimenting with moving your hands to cymbals instead of toms, for example. And I did a couple of different speeds there just to show you the difference in sound. You know, playing them sort of that double time feel, half time feel. And you can do, the good thing about combo fills, you can mix it up. You can do 2s and 4s, you can do whatever you want. So let's try some, and this is all with open splashes, by the way. We're gonna do some that aren't open splashes right after this. But we're going to try some that are combos of 4s. So let's do 4 and 4. So in that example, I was throwing them in with the kicks underneath. They weren't open splashes like when I was doing the 2s and 2s. Gives it a bit more punch. Definitely a lot more bottom end.
Yeah, do that a little bit faster. If you
Sure.
can. Yeah. That what he just did there is a great exercise for you guys. That's, I remember doing that.
We're doing that?
Then do 6s.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, really good stuff
You can
there.
get into triplets as well. Yeah, actually, it's good that you mentioned that because I do a triplet fill that incorporates some splash cymbals, and it's actually a really cool fill. I might have taught it on another lesson before, but nonetheless, it's a really cool fill, so I'll show it to you guys. It is going, starting the triplet on you can do it on a splash. It works really well at high tempos because the splash is so quick. But basically, here's the pattern. That's one of my favorite fills.
That is so cool. Can you do that in a beat complex?
Yeah. Concept.
Concept.
Yeah. Here we go.
Beat fill complex.
Yeah, I'll put some context to it.
Thank you.
All right. The complex fill.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Here we go.
Yeah. Yeah, Maddie Germany says, yeah, he's good with his feet. Drummonkey says he must have elastic ankles. I've never heard that one before, elastic ankles.
I'm good at certain things with my double kicks.
Yeah, no
and other things I'm still working on. But thank you. Yeah, so that's a great fill, and that's a cool way to incorporate your splash cymbals, while you're on the toms as well.
Yeah.
Because basically you're going splash to tom, and I was trying to move it around there. Got a little sloppy, but that's a good one. It's tough to play at high speeds.
Yeah. And we're not gonna like I said, this isn't about a specific fill. So I know somebody's saying, "Oh, I can't do that unless there's sheet music to it." It's just concepts, It's
concepts, and the concept is take any combo fill and apply it to splash cymbals. Not just splash cymbals, but try to incorporate those with the rest of the kit, basically. What you can do is just go to any of the combo lessons in the Edge archives. I know I've got a couple in there. Take the notation from that. Just substitute, sometimes there's a crash or a china in these combo fills. Just substitute it for a splash cymbal. Or if there's not, if there's just kicks, snares, and toms, substitute. Let's say, okay, rack tom number 2 is now going to be 10-inch splash.
Yeah.
And just go from there.
And I remember when I was practicing a lot of these, I would do the opposite, where if there was just bass drum, I would put splashes with the bass drum. So just like you were doing on that one, 4,
doubling.
and then you do 4 in there. And I like how you did the 8th notes, not the 16th notes sometimes.
Yeah, just to change it up.
But we do got to move on. It's 10:30, so let's talk about linear fills now.
Yeah, okay, so linear fills. This is also kind of like a combo fills, but now this time we're not going to be playing the kicks with the splashes. Sometimes what I like to do is the combo of 2 and 2 where you're splitting up your hands, like this one. And I like to put that left hand on a splash cymbal every once in a while. It just sounds really unique. So that would sound like this. So you get some really unique sounding combo fills there, and it's just as easy as moving that left hand onto a splash. So I was kind of changing it up there and improvising a little bit just to vary the rhythms. But you can just start with 2 and 2, right, left, kick, kick, and move your left to one of your splash cymbals. And you can get really creative with it. Like, for example, you can keep your left on a splash, move the right hand around the kit. You can do all sorts of things. Maybe let's try that one. So that's something you guys can definitely play around with.
Yeah.
Get creative with that one. And other than that, you can do things like come up with linear phrases, and try to use those as fills. Like, for example, so I was just going with a basic linear form there, kick, left, right, and trying to move that around and come up with some new ideas. That's something that you can do. Again, you can go to any linear exercises or linear rhythms that might be in the archives and just substitute any one of the drums for a splash cymbal. it's pretty much as simple as that.
Yeah.
You're going to get totally different sounds.
Totally, yeah.
It's going to sound like a whole new thing, basically. Yeah.
The one that I'm really looking forward to, which is polyphonic pairings. Can we move on to that part?
Yeah. Okay, sure.
What is that, by the way?
Okay, polyphony in music is pretty much the opposite of something that's linear. It's when any two notes or tones are played at the same time. So, in this context, what I like to do is play a splash cymbal with a tom. Because up till now, we've been separating all the toms and splashes. With the combo fills, we've been taking turns with the right hand is on this tom, left hand is on that splash. But now we're going to play them together, and you get all sorts of interesting harmonies happening this way. So I'm going to just play around the kit just to give you guys an example of how these toms will sound with splashes. So, as you can tell, it's pretty interesting sounding because you don't hear that every day.
No.
Right? Drummers aren't often using their toms and their cymbals together in unison. I remember hearing some drummers, Vinny Colaiuta, again, another example because he's just so musical. He likes to hit his floor tom and his crash cymbal at the same time. And I remember the first time I heard that, I thought it was like some sort of a mistake.
Yeah.
Because it's like, wait a minute, I just heard a floor tom and a crash at the same time. Did he mean to do that?
Yeah.
But then, I kept hearing it and it kept popping up in other places and it started to make sense. He's going for polyphony. He wants to create that harmony between a drum and a cymbal. So that's something that's pretty cool. So basically, I use this a few times within a combo fill. In the Omnisite song 11, there's this big long outro. It's almost like a jam section where there's, it's just really open for me to play anything. And it turned out really well on the recording because I'm just improvising a whole bunch of different fills. And one of the fills is polyphonic combo fill. So what I'm doing is I'm starting with a splash and a tom. It's a triplet-based fill. And then I'm moving to the next splash and the tom. So it sounds like this.
Now, the one thing about that fill, which I just noticed, is because you're using your double bass, when you're putting both hands together, you're able to bring in another voice right afterwards without having to do two hands at once. So if you're not a double bass player and you're not really super proficient with your single bass, can you show us maybe an example of this in maybe more of a basic fill?
Sure. Yeah, so if you're not a double kick player or you're not, if you're not at the stage where you're playing, 16th note triplets with your combo fills yet, you can simplify it. And you can just do something like... Just try to come up with a phrase where you have the cymbals and the toms working together, and it doesn't have to have double kick. It can be anything. It can be whatever you want, really. Just try to come up with a fill that you're familiar with. Think of a fill that you know really well, and then try to figure out, okay, how am I going to work in a splash in unison with a tom? Because you do have to hit them at the exact same time, and try to avoid flamming as much as you can. A good way to just start out with this is just to do singles around the kit alternating. Do singles alternating with one hand and one foot. well, actually both hands and one foot, because you want to keep the splash together with the tom. So you could start out with something like this. Start slow and then gradually speed it up, and move it around randomly. The more, in this example, the more, or in this case, the more cymbals you have, the better, because it allows you to have more mobility around the drum kit. If you only have one splash, that's cool. Just stay on that one splash. You can even switch hands. You can do something like this. Yeah, and that's just to get both hands working together. Because when you first do these polyphony fills, it's a bit awkward because you're not really used to hitting a splash cymbal and a tom at the exact same time. So you have to get used to those different angles that you're going to be playing if you're trying to combine a splash cymbal with a tom. I mean, there's a lot of really cool things you can do with this. You can do different rhythms. I've heard stuff like something that Terry Bozzio does a lot. A lot of two notes at the same time to create a harmony. Of course, his drum set is tuned to specific notes, but but you can play around with it, and you can even branch out from splashes and use crash cymbal, China cymbal, ride cymbal. Sometimes it sounds really cool if you hit the bell of a ride with the tom. Actually, there's another fill I just thought of. It's a bit crazy, but it's in the Omnisite song PSI, Projected Self-Image, off the Path album, where I do this double time fill. I'm hitting a splash and a tom, and then a tom and the bell of a ride cymbal. Let me see if I can remember this one. Yeah, so that's the concept, and it is just a really fast exchange of singles between your hands and your right foot. And yeah, that's an example of how I'm using it in a song.
So we have 15 minutes left. We have a bunch of questions. We've already kind of talked about melodic fills, and again, you really need to have multiple splashes in order to make them melodically work, because you need to have two different voices, I guess.
The more tones or the more notes you have, the better.
Yeah.
Hard to create melodies with two notes.
Yeah, exactly.
Or two different tones. So
I don't know if you wanted to talk anything about the last point of melodies. We've already kind of talked about it a lot, I think, on this, but
just a short example in case they missed it yesterday. I mean, melodies you can just come up with, and then what you can try to do is, for example, if you have a tom fill that goes. You could do something like. So a good way to get into this, if you want to approach more melodic drumming, is come up with a melodic phrase on the toms, kind of like that fill that I just did, and try to emulate it with your cymbals.
Yeah.
Which is what I was doing with my splashes there. I was actually trying to replicate each pitch. And you can see that the splashes are kind of correlating to the toms. I mean, this is the small tom, small splash. Then you got the 8-inch that goes with this one. The 10-inch would go with the 14, and the 12 would go with the 16. So in this case, when I have 4 splashes that are different sizes, I also have 4 toms that are different sizes, right? So I've got a lot of possibilities for melodic phrases and ideas there. And you can try to emulate those, take them from the toms and just move them to the splash cymbals. You know, like if, for example, I went like this, that's a melodic phrase. Now I'd have to figure out how to do that on the splashes. Granted, they're set up a little bit differently. I'm going low to high, so I know I'm going to have to do something like. So yeah, pretty close. You get the idea.
Yeah.
Come up with melodic phrases, try to repeat those phrases on the cymbals, and then work them into a fill.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
Let's get to some questions because
we got questions. All right, here we go.
Starting from the very bottom, Maddie, Germany says, "Hey, Dave and Chris, hope you guys are cool."
Guten Tag.
Yeah, guten Tag. He says, my question is, my friend gave me a Peisty 2002 4-inch accent cymbal.
Cool.
I don't even know very much about these or even seen them played, but I want to know if I can use it as a splash.
Yeah, that's cool because I used to have the exact same one.
You did?
It's the smallest cymbal I've ever owned.
I was going to say, that's a 6-inch, and that's small. And
it's basically the bell of the 6-inch. Imagine that. Like, I couldn't hit it. I was missing it half the time.
Yeah.
I have a hard enough time with a 6-inch splash over here. But yeah, that's a cool little cymbal because what it is this little thick, really thick 4-inch cymbal. It's tiny. And yes, you can use it as a splash or accent cymbal. What I would recommend when you have a cymbal that small, and I do this with usually do this with my 6-inch splash, get a hi-hat felt. Don't use the regular size felt. This is taking up more space, right?
It's a good call.
So get a really tiny felt, put it on top of your little 4-inch accent cymbal, and yeah, incorporate it into your setup. It's a really nice cymbal. I just didn't really have much of a use for it personally, because if I wanted a bell sound, I have different bell cymbals that are a little bit bigger that I would go to, but it's a pretty neat little cymbal. So did I answer the question there?
I think you did.
Yeah.
Okay. You can use it as a splash, but
You
it's
can
really high, pingy.
Yeah, it's got a lot of sustain. Those accent cymbals are almost like bells that are cymbal shaped, if that makes sense. They're almost like flat bells, really.
Yeah.
So they've got a lot of sustain. They're not quite as punchy and percussive as a splash cymbal, but they serve the same kind of purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Will the Thrill asks, what kind of splash cymbals do you use? Now, we already talked about these ones. What about on your personal kit?
On my personal kit. Okay, yeah, I am borrowing some Drumeo cymbals today because my cymbals are at a rehearsal studio that I didn't have access to in time. So this is my personal cymbal. This is one of my favorites. I'd say this is my second favorite splash cymbal. It's a Sabian 12-inch Ozone double AX. It sounds great. And my main cymbal, my go-to splash, which is usually right here in place of this Peisty, is a 10-inch Sabian Evolution.
Yeah.
Which is probably the best splash I've ever heard.
Nice. Yeah, those are nice sounding splashes.
It's nice and thin. I personally like really thin splashes because they're quick and they're airy. Sometimes you get a splash cymbal and it's a big gongy sounding, and that means it's too thick.
Yeah.
So I like the really thin ones. Also, the 7-inch Sabian Evolution is really nice. This is also my personal 6-inch Zildjian. I like to mix brands because I'm going for particular sounds, and there's nothing quite like this cymbal. Just something about the way Zildjian made the 6-inch splash cymbal that sounds different than all the other ones I've tried. Like nothing sounds like this. Listen to this thing.
Yeah.
Actually, I bought this right off of the stage at a drum clinic.
No way?
Yeah, Akira Jimbo was here. and he was using this splash.
You just went right up to him
and I was like, I need that splash. And Long McQuaid was like, well, the whole kit is for sale. I'm like, no, I just want that splash cymbal. That's the one.
Yeah, that's the one.
They sold it to me.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's a great cymbal. So I like to mix it up, though. Yesterday, if you tuned in, I mentioned that I also use China splashes from time to time. I do some metal gigs, and if I want something more abrasive, I'll use a China splash, which is a lot more cutting. It's really quick and really loud.
Cool. Drum Monkey says, do splash fills work in all genres of music? What if I was in a blues-based groove fill? Would you be able to let it splash that, and would it still work musically, or would you stay away from them in certain styles of music?
No, I think they're honestly applicable to every single genre of music under the sun.
Yeah.
I've heard them and used them in reggae, country, funk, blues, jazz, metal. The list goes on.
Yeah.
It's really up to you how you want to use them. Right?
Yeah.
So it's all up to the drummer. If you're playing blues, let's say you're doing like a shuffle. So there you go.
I agree. And, of all the gear that you can buy, accessories for your kit, like a cowbell, a China cymbal, of all the little accessories you can get, a splash cymbal, I think, is the most utilized, most useful, I guess.
I think so.
Versatile is the word.
If you're going to accessorize your drum kit, let's say you have a basic setup, crash, ride, hats, definitely get a splash next.
I would say so.
Yeah. I remember getting my first splash, and I was like so excited.
Yeah.
It was a little 8-inch splash. And I was really into this drummer who played with Pearl Jam on the second and third albums.
Yeah.
Dave Abruzzi. He was a great drummer. Awesome groove, like John Bonham, heavy grooves, but so much cool, tasty stuff going on over top of that. Almost kind of fusion-esque. He had splashes and all sorts of effects, cymbals, mini chinas, and it was just awesome. And then I was like, I need the splash cymbal that he's using, that little splash. And then I eventually got that splash cymbal, and that was the first addition to my beginner's kit.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah. And I bought wood blocks and cowbells that I use like every 100 times I play the drums, but splash drums I use most of the time. So
exactly.
Captain Howdy, this is the last question of the day. So
howdy.
He says, howdy, Captain.
Howdy, Captain, howdy.
I was thinking about possibly buying a super cheap splash and adding in rivets. Have you ever done this? And if you have, do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, actually, I have a splash. It's 12-inch with rivets. I didn't put them in myself, but it sounds awesome. The thing about that is that it adds a lot of sustain. So usually, I'm thinking of splash cymbals as very quick, like they're in and they're out very quick. But in that case, it kind of creates a whole new splash cymbal because of the sustain that it brings when you have the rivet. My only tip tip for that, if you're putting a rivet in your splash cymbal, don't put too many. Put one, because otherwise it weighs down your cymbal. Splashes are already very small and light. And I would also do it on a larger splash, at least a 10-inch or a 12-inch. There's more surface area. And you get a really nice sort of airy sustain when you have that one rivet in there just sizzling away. Once you add more than one, if you have 2 or 3, it just weighs the cymbal down, almost chokes it.
Yeah.
Right, because of the weight of the rivets that are hanging off of it. But that's a great idea. Yeah. And thanks for reminding me. I actually forgot I do have a splash that has rivets in it. Yeah.
If only you had reminded him before the lesson, he should have brought it in.
Yeah, I'll bring it out next time maybe.
Yeah.
But it's a great idea. If you want to add some sustain to your splashes, if you think they're a little too quick, that's the way to go.
Yeah.
But I've never personally installed them myself. That one I think I bought used, and it came like that.
Yeah.
And I wanted something different, so I thought, this splash cymbal with rivets. This might sound cool.
Or
it's very jazzy.
Hang a little chain down it. You never know.
Get a little miniature bathtub chain type thing.
Yeah.
Put it on there if you want to get an idea of what your splash is going to sound like with rivets.
Yeah. Well,
all right. So
I think that's.
Are we out of time?
We're out of time
already.
We're out of
Okay.
time. I'm gonna get you to play us out if that's cool.
Yeah.
Just
sure.
whatever, beat solo, but add some splashes. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Chris.
Thanks, Dave.
And we got some play-alongs we're recording after this for Drum You Edge that you'll see very soon. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thanks for coming out, guys.
Yeah, hopefully you're inspired now to go and buy a splash if you don't, and if you do already have one, bust it out and start practicing with some of these concepts.
That's right. There's a lot you can do.
All right.
All right.
See you later.